The Dog Man movie is incredible and super funny, but very few people have noticed that plenty of crimes happen throughout this DreamWorks film. That's right, did you know that almost every character in Dog Man could face serious punishment if they were held accountable for their crimes?
Dog Man, listen up! You're the only one that can stop him!
Despite being a pure-hearted little kid, Little Petey is among those characters who have committed serious crimes. After all, one of the first things the kitten did after being created was to team up with Petey for a villainous mission. Luckily for Little Petey, he didn't actually help his father with anything, and the mission was cancelled. However, the fact that Little Petey knows Petey, the most wanted criminal in all of OK City, knows where he lives, has seen him trying to commit a crime, and didn't report any of this to Dog Man or another officer, is enough for the kitten to be charged with concealing a serious crime, which could land him 3 years in prison. And to make things worse, Little Petey committed another crime during the mission. He piloted Petey's ship, making it fly at high speed and nearly crash into a building. Flying a vehicle like that at such a dangerous speed could lead to a reckless driving charge, resulting in a $2,500 fine and 6 months in prison. Yeah, I don't think anyone else has committed this many crimes right after being born. If Little Petey were found guilty of all these charges, he wouldn't get out of prison until he was nearly 4 years old. However, we have to remember that he's just a little kid, way too young to face the consequences of his actions, so the one who would have to deal with this would be Petey himself. But you'll soon see that the world's most evil cat is already going to be way too busy with his own sentences. So get ready, this is Cinewave. Petey is one of the biggest criminals in the Dog Man world, and for good reason. In just one movie, he did so many terrible things that even some of the worst real-world criminals would be impressed. You can tell right from the beginning of the film when he commits multiple crimes at once. Let's start with the fact that he's running from the police, which alone carries a 1-year prison sentence. During the chase, he drives like a madman through the city, which is considered reckless driving, adding another 6 months in prison and a $2,500 fine. Running through the sewers during the chase is also a crime. Trespassing tacks on another year to the villain's sentence and increases his fine by $1,000. Let's not forget that he planted a bomb in the city intending to kill Knight and Greg, 2 separate crimes: illegal possession of explosives, adding another year to his sentence, and conspiracy, which carries a 14-year sentence. But as if that weren't bad enough, Petey actually detonates the bomb and nearly kills both officers. An attack of that scale adds another 20 years to his time in prison. Think it can't get any worse? Petey committed even more crimes throughout the movie. He escaped from prison 6 times, and each escape adds 2 years to a person's sentence. Since he did it so many times, his sentence increased by 12 years. After one of these escapes, he broke into a research center and stole Flippy's modified body. That means another trespassing charge, 1 year in prison, and $1,000 in fines. Stealing Flippy's body is a major offense since it had been cybernetically modified. This qualifies as theft of a regulated item, which can add another 20 years to Petey's sentence, especially because this crime caused a major disaster in the city at the end of the film. And between each escape and return to prison, Petey attacked Dog Man and OK City with various giant vehicles, spreading chaos and endangering everyone in town. That definitely qualifies as terrorism, which could result in a life sentence or even the death penalty. But Petey truly has no limits, and his crime spree continues even after all of this. Remember when he used a cloning machine to create Little Petey? Believe it or not, cloning living beings with the intent of creating an identical new being is illegal and highly prohibited, carrying a penalty of 10 years in prison and a $10 million fine. Okay, maybe you're clever and want to argue that Petey isn't a human, he's a cat. But in Dog Man's world, cats like Petey are treated as humans under the law. Or do you think your pet cat could be arrested for blowing up people? I mean, I hope your cat isn't doing that in the first place. Back to the sentences. Right after creating his clone, Petey proves to be a terrible father by making the little kitten cry, then dragging him into a dangerous mission, and on top of that, he tries to sell his own son. That would definitely be considered child abuse, adding another 3 years in prison. But at this point, what's a few extra years, right? Right after that, Petey completely abandons the kitten with no plans to return for him. This is the definition of child abandonment, which adds about 3 more years to his sentence. Adding up the penalties for all these crimes, Petey's final sentence is 86 years and 6 months in prison, plus execution, and that doesn't even include all the money he owes the justice system, which surpasses $10 million. Looks like Petey will have to hand over all his inventions to the government just to pay off that massive fine. Even though Petey is a major villain, no one expected his sentence to be this heavy, right? And the worst part, we're only talking about the crimes we actually saw him commit in the movie. Before the film even started, Petey was already known as the world's most evil cat and had committed countless crimes. Imagine how much worse his sentence would be if we knew everything he had done. If you also think Petey's sentence is even worse than it seems, comment below with hashtag Petey. If everyone in the Dogman universe were punished for their crimes, not even the main character would get away scot-free. Even though he's a cop, Dogman has done things that would land even a law enforcement officer behind bars. What's that? You really think your idol is a hero with an unquestionable sense of justice? Then how do you defend this scene where he aggressively barks at an innocent mailman? That could definitely be considered a crime of intimidation, which can get the canine officer locked up for a year. In fact, the fact that he's a cop makes it even worse, because he could also be charged with official misconduct in this scene and in many others where he acts like a regular dog instead of an officer of the law. That's another year in prison. But our beloved Dogman also committed another pretty serious crime. Actually, multiple times. Every time he starts licking the chief's face, even though he knows he hates it, Dogman is technically committing harassment, which could land him 3 months in jail. Since he did it multiple times and even licked Petey while the villain's eyes were closed, his sentence could easily be bumped up to a full year. And on top of intimidating and harassing people, Dogman's also a thief. He actually stole Flippy's lifeless body just so he could rub himself against it, which, let's be honest, is pretty creepy. The theft alone could add 3 months to his sentence, but desecrating a corpse is even worse and could get him an extra year in prison. Adding up all these charges, Dogman would be sentenced to 4 years and 3 months behind bars. On top of that, he'd obviously lose his job and would never be allowed to work in law enforcement again. It doesn't compare to Petey's astronomical sentence, but that's only because we're assuming that all the times Dogman sped through the streets, beat people up, and destroyed property won't be brought to trial, since he did it all in the name of stopping dangerous criminals like Flippy and Petey himself. Now, Flippy is another case where the sentence is going to be anything but light, but the crazy part is that all the crimes this fish committed happened in a single day, over a very short period of time. After coming back to life, Flippy used his powers to turn multiple buildings into monstrous creatures that wreaked havoc across the city. That means he could be charged with several different crimes: theft, vandalism, destruction of private property, and of course, terrorism, which in this case could easily result in the death penalty. Kidnapping is also on the list since he abducted Lil Petey during his crime spree. The sentence for each of these crimes would be between 5 to 10 years in prison, but since they were all committed across multiple properties, Flippy's total punishment would definitely be 57 years in prison plus the death penalty, and that's assuming the judge decides to go easy on him. But did you know that not subscribing to this channel is also a serious crime? That's right, if you don't want to spend the rest of your life behind bars, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now! Another one who won't escape judgment is the mayor of OK City. Even though she seems like a decent person to the public, the movie shows that she actually has a very questionable personality. For example, she constantly yells at the chief. While some people might think that kind of behavior is normal between a boss and an employee, it's actually not okay at all, and since she goes way overboard with it, it can easily be considered intimidation. In other words, she could very well end up spending a year in prison just for her lack of self-control. But her most serious crime is definitely appointing her own brother as the warden of Cat Jail. That's an incredibly important position that requires a long process to ensure someone is qualified to run a prison. But from what we see, it looks like the mayor just gave her brother the job without him proving he was competent. So much so that Petey keeps escaping from Cat Jail all the time, which means her brother clearly isn't doing his job. Nepotism is when someone gives a family member a job, especially an important position, without them actually deserving it. When this happens in government jobs, it's considered a very serious crime. If people find out the mayor did this, she'll definitely lose her position, and since this could also be seen as abuse of power, she could even end up serving 5 years in prison. So in total, the mayor would be sentenced to 6 years behind bars. Plus, of course, she'd be removed from office as the mayor of OK City and banned from ever working in government again. Fair enough, right? If you want to keep having fun, we've got 2 awesome videos on your screen right now. Just pick the one that grabs your attention the most. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.